Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of classic music. Sounds kind of a weird way to define anything pre-2000s, which is a pretty large gap, but I'm pretty sure most of the stuff we're checking out this week is rock or metal, which kind of puts it into a 30 to 40 year range. Regardless, we are checking out some classic rock today, looking at the band Yes, and something off of their Relayer album, which came out in 1974. We're going to be looking at track 2 of, well, there's only 3 tracks on the album, which I thought was pretty interesting. But track 2 is called Sound Chaser. Let's dive into this and see what Yes is bringing to the table today. All right. There's those harmonies. It's really tough to It's tough to figure out what exactly they're trying to do with all of this. It's very overwhelming, I think is the best word for it. This is a cool line. Both the octave work between the guitar and the bass, but also the more melodic drum work. Interesting use of fading and rising volume there, creating the feeling of like rising and falling crescendo. Random classical style arpeggiating, and gone immediately for bringing like some Spanish guitar over here. And that's gone now too. Some of the faster playing in that last section is a little sloppier than I would have liked. And I like the idea of the dynamic volume. It's just a tad bit too aggressive, I think, for my tastes. Good idea, just not sold on the execution. Okay, that was actually a solid transition into this idea.
From the moment I reached out to hold, I felt a sound, and what touches our soul slowly moves as touch rebounds, and to know that tempo will continue, lost in trance of dances as rhythm takes another turn. As is my want, I only reach to look in your eyes.
I feel like this choppy playing is going to be very hit and miss. You either like it or you don't. I'd be very surprised to find somebody in the middle who's just kind of like, whatever. So we're bringing back some of the elements of the intro now. Oh. So we're still in 5, but we had a tempo increase here. I can get behind. Why is this instrument so much louder than all the others have been? That was a fun walk-up. Okay, that's fun. Now, I'm just gonna start this off right here. I have some ideas about what this might be representing, but it's devoid of context. Maybe this makes more sense as the middle track to an album, and what comes before it and what comes after it kind of places it in some sort of artistic narration or something. Maybe there's a lyrical narration that would help unlock some stuff. I don't know. Like I said, I do have some thoughts about what they're trying to attempt here, and what their intentions are with this piece. As far as, again, just this song in a vacuum, no other context. But it is so much of a lot of everything and ends up being very overwhelming. I think I'm just going to stick with that word. It's a fantastic word to describe this song. And I'm just going to throw this out there. Subjectively, this is not my cup of tea. I may come around to enjoying it artistically, but sonically, it just never quite comes together for me. But I want to start with, I think, some of the stuff that works well. First of all, there is a lot of technical expertise on display here. There's a lot of really cool organ runs. There's some wild guitar playing. The bass gets to play lead, usually alongside the guitar, but still it's more present than, just playing pedal tones or something like that. Something less involved. The bassist is definitely involved in what's going on here. And the drummer is tearing it up with all sorts of melodic drumming styles that incidentally do keep the beat and the tempo, but also falls in line with usually what the guitars are doing and tries to mimic that as best as it can using a drum kit. The instruments are pitched on a drum kit, but they're not things you can change, and they're not usually pitched to be in tune. They just have a tone to them, You can't make a sound without a tone. So the drummer's following along the best they can and doing these ideas that mimic guitar playing more so than a metronome. And I think all of that, it's just consistently impressive listening to all these instruments play at such a high level. On top of that, we also have the vocalists? I don't know. The first chord that we got about a minute and a half into the track, I think was multitudes of vocalists, but the stuff we heard at the end, I think, was just the main vocalist multi-tracked, possibly? I actually don't know. 74. I kind of have, you guys have helped me really understand what kind of technology was available in the mid to late 60s, and I kind of have a general idea of what was possible in the 80s on, but the 70s, I feel like there was just a lot of really quick innovation in music creation technology, and I'm not really sure where 74 falls in this. Was it possible to multi-track at this time? They record something now and then come back later and record another one and then record another one and splice them all together. I honestly don't know. So maybe it was multiple vocalists, but at the same time, all the timbres seem to fit the same guy. It all sounds like the same voice. So I'm not actually sure what's going on there at the end. Y'all can let me know, especially you more knowledgeable Yes fans. You guys always have some fantastic information and insight and context to add at the end of these reactions. I'm looking forward to some of that information. But yeah, this is just a wonderful display of everyone's skill. But on top of that, I also want to bring up the production. I don't know who produced this, who the engineer was on this track, but absolutely phenomenal. There's some parts in here that are very much of its time. Also, they feel a little experimental, particularly that organ at the end. Not sure why it's so present in the mix, But otherwise, the way that everything is clear, but forceful. This feels like a massive production at times. Some of what I think are digital instruments. Again, 74, I think we had early synthesizers around the time, so it's possible. Some of these instruments sound really good, though, for 74. But they definitely have an electronic element to them. They don't sound like an acoustic instrument. So, again, the engineer and whoever was messing with the synthesizer patches on this, just really great, especially for the time. I mean, they're good already. Like, not even for its time. These are good sounds that I think complement the overall palette of the song rather well. But they also feel quite a bit ahead of their time, too. They feel like something I would have expected out of technology from the 80s, especially with the 80s pop scene. And not so much the mid 70s. So again, just props to everybody on this. I think there's just a great display of skill and experimentation on this track that I want to make sure I compliment before I get into probably some nitpicky things. Now, beyond that though, what is this song doing? We kick it off with some wild bass guitar and drum ideas. Again, everybody's sort of falling in line. Harmonic melody on the guitar and bass, and then the drums following along the best they can with, percussion instruments. Very fast playing, and right out of here, there's some noisy bits. There's I say noisy in a positive way, just that the sounds I don't think are designed to complement everything perfectly, and they're designed to sound cluttered. And so noisy, I think, is a compliment. It is the intention of the section. There's also some dissonant harmony in here. I think there's a little bit of chromatic stuff at the beginning. It really sounds like going through a toy box and just chucking out toys, trying to get to the bottom to find that one that you want. Except we're doing that with sound, with notes and riffs and stuff. And things start to coalesce after a little bit, and then we start to focus in on a single idea. Now, it's a bit of a faster idea. It's a little chaotic. What goes on around it, I think, adds to that chaos a little bit. As I mentioned, the bass, the drums, and the guitar are pretty much uniform here, but when the vocals come in, that sounds like a wildly different idea. When some of the organ stuff comes in, it gets a little messy. It's not really complementary to what everyone else is doing. It gets wild, and not only do we have these ideas that complicate the rhythmic or harmonic nature that's sort of present at the center of this song, but we also have all of these jumping ideas where we'll be playing this speed in this key with these instruments and this riff, and then we're just going to jump over to this totally different idea, totally different vibe, might even speed the song up or slow it down, just drastically alter what the track is doing. And these sorts of transitions are all over the place, regardless of how cohesive a section is. You know that the jump to the next section will not have a lot of cohesion to it. There are a couple of sections that I like the transition to. Not that they were perfect transitions, but that they did try to bring an element of where we are into where we are going. I think I only had 2 of these moments where I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. And see, again, I don't even use the word smooth. They still weren't smooth transitions. Almost every transition in here is jarring in one way or another, but they were neat. They weren't just, we were doing this, now we're doing this. There was some element trying to tie them together, and in some way, even if the song wanted to go against that cohesion, there was still one instrument that tried to smooth things over a little bit and created, if nothing else, a neat idea. And so between all of these different ideas being smashed together, and then the ideas themselves also kind of being chaotic and noisy at times, it's a song that, well, that's where the overwhelming part comes in. There's a lot of layers doing their own things, creating a lot of clashing sounds, and the sections themselves aren't doing anything to create a cohesive journey either. There's a lot of things going on in this track. And that really is my overview of the song, of trying to figure out, what it's trying to do. This, I think, is its key identity. It's the key intention to the song is a lot of a lot. And actually taking this idea from this grand scope, we're going to bring it down and to look at a little bit more minutia in it. Some of these ideas I don't think are particularly strong. Some of them I think work really well. We have the intro guitar, bass, drum idea that actually comes back in a couple of times in the track. I think once in the middle and then once towards the end right before the outro. I thought that was very cool that despite a primarily linear track, we still have these motifs that show up and create this, not necessarily a cyclicality, but sort of a checkpoint. We've explored these things, and now we're going to see something that we recognize. Then we're going to explore these things and then have this familiar element come back. And I like that. No matter how wild the song gets, we can always return to this more cohesive idea. Even if it tends to be accompanied by new, fresh, wild elements that sit around it, that core, almost, home, the core, actually, that's a good word for it. It's the core of the song, what sits at the center. No matter how far away we get from it, it's still what everything returns back to. It sits at the middle. Like I said, it's nice to come back to that sometimes when things get a bit chaotic. Like, I don't know what's going on here. The sounds start getting a bit tense. And we can return to this. And I'm like, okay, a moment to breathe, to relax, to reflect on what I just checked out. Not have to focus too much on what's going on now because I'm familiar with it. But aside from that, a lot of it just kind of goes. There's a lot of solo sections in here. I think we had 2 guitar solos. We had an organ solo. We had technically a bit of a vocal solo. There was a lot of vocal harmony to it, and there was even a counterpoint where we had the 2 outsides with the one in the middle kind of creating a rhythmic syncopation against the other line. But it's still a vocals solo, I guess, if you want to call it that. So, man, these were hit and miss for me. They really were. Some parts I thought worked well, others didn't. I mentioned that the guitar was playing these really fast ideas with a lot of use of pedal tone. 16th note picking, pedal tone, and a melody against that. I think the idea was solid. The execution left me wanting. As I mentioned, it was a little sloppy. I would have liked a little bit more perfection, I suppose, with the timing of the right hand and left hand on that. Granted, it gives it a very specific coloring. Maybe that's what they were going for. It does feel a bit more chaotic and more muddy than if it was played more perfectly. Maybe that's the sound they wanted in it. It just never really clicked with me. Maybe I can come around to it artistically, but just listening to it, I was not a big fan of that section. Some of the organ parts, I think we had a mellotron solo in there at one point. That sounded really nice. It had nice melody to it. There's some shred in it, but also shred, just really fast playing. He's shredding on the mellotron. But it also felt like it had body, it had direction. It wasn't just fast playing all the time, even though a lot of the song is that in general. It still took time to breathe and to compress and contract and have moments of faster playing and moments of slower playing. It felt natural in a way that I don't think many of the other ideas do. That's actually something I want to return to. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I do want to touch back on that later. I hope I remember. And that's sort of my feeling with a lot of it, is that there's some parts that are just good on paper, but wasn't too keen on the execution. And other parts I was just really enthralled with. I would have loved to have more of those. Another section that again, I thought was good on paper, but not great on execution, was the volume dynamic element that came in, I think, on the second or third section of the song, where we had these volume swells on the guitar. And like, that's a cool idea. This is something I've talked about a lot in regarding metal and guitar in particular, but a lot of mainstream music in general, is that we just don't have volume dynamics. We have perceived quieter sections and perceived louder sections, but if you ever actually check the volume on these tracks, they're full volume all the time. And this is something that I love about acoustic performance, whether that's classical or jazz or even just a stripped down acoustic rock band, right? Just having that ability to change volume on your instrument without having to use a volume pedal or something. I just feel like there's something unnatural about that. You can certainly push that and create something that feels a bit more normal, but I feel like it takes more effort than to just play an instrument softer or louder instead of manipulating the sound after you've maxed it out already. And so what we get here is dynamics, something I ask for more in the realm of rock, but in a way that, at least for me, is not welcome to my ears. And as I had mentioned in the reaction, I think that's going to be a hit and miss thing. You're either really going to like that specific sound or you're not. I really don't think I don't expect people to sit in the middle on that one. I perceive that to be a bit more of a divisive sound. What I find is interesting, though, is it reminds me of the side-chained bass kick that we hear in modern pop music, where the synth will be side-chained to the bass, so when the bass comes in hard on the downbeat, the synth drops to nothing and then rises back up. And you get that womp, 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 womp kind of sounds. That's what I heard here, and I think it works a lot better with the sidechained idea, but I think part of that might just be that newer technology allows for automation in a more natural way. Whereas this was probably done by hand, maybe on the engineering side, maybe with a volume pedal, but regardless, there's the human elements of creating imperfections in the growth and decay that end up feeling not great, at least to my ears. Again, like I said, that's a subjective thing, but they had a whole minute and a half of that idea, and it didn't work for me at the beginning of it, and I wasn't too keen of it by the end, but I liked the melody that was played on it, and I still like the idea of dynamics within that melody. Again, I wonder if this would, it'd be totally different to redo it now with automation techniques. But still, I think it would be pretty cool to hear what that would sound like with modern equipment and see if my opinion of that changes at all, or if maybe it is the idea itself, where I would just rather prefer natural volume dynamics rather than controlled volume dynamics in post after you've maxed out your guitar sound and distorted it and amplified it. And I think the last thing I want to touch on here then is going to be what this song means to me. It's chaotic. It's all over the place. It does so many different things. There's, like I mentioned during the reaction, there's a little bit of Spanish guitar at one point. We enter into some classical stuff. We have some jazzy chordal transitions. It is a lot. There's so many different influences and sounds in here. And tempos and speeds and feels and atmospheres. It's a smorgasbord of musical ideas. It's called Sound Chaser. And to me, I kind of imagine them trying to find inspiration. Sometimes, when you run into writer's block, you just have to noodle around. See what happens. Sometimes that yields nothing. You come up with a couple of licks, a few ideas, nothing that you can really expand into anything. But, you played some stuff. That's what this feels like to me, constantly jumping around between noodled ideas. A lick here that you thought was pretty cool, so you expanded it out a little bit, but you had no idea where to take it, so we're just going to play a different lick after that. And then you came up with this cool chord progression. So let me just, do a little improvised solo on top of that. All right, that's cool, but I don't know where to take it. But the drummer came up with this cool pattern, so we're going to start with that and build off of it a little bit, but we're going to take that anywhere either. And so, oh, the organ player had this cool idea, so let them play that for a little bit. And then, oh yeah, I found this other cool thing on the guitar. I mean, listen to this lick, it's pretty sick. Let's throw that in here too. And that's what it feels like, trying to chase inspiration. I think that's why there's so many pushes and pulls, so many contrasting ideas in it, so many wildly eclectic ideas. Part of that, I think, is also just the experimentation of the time, and the band prog rock was in a very sonic experimental segment of time. I've always mentioned that classic prog rock's very different than modern prog rock, because classic prog rock really felt like the Wild West, whereas modern prog rock has an idea. It tends to be a bit less experimental in sound and more experimental in how to adapt rock into more artistic expression. Not to say that this isn't artistic, but there's a lot of songs, especially from this era of prog rock, that are very eclectic, which is not a word I would use to describe Porcupine Tree or Pineapple Thief or even Dream Theater. I know they're metal, but still modern progressive. It tends to be less eclectic and more measured. And this captures a lot of the stranger experimentation you could find in this older era of prog rock. But I think that there's a story behind it too. Imagine chasing a little, I don't know, a flying insect, or if you want to get fantastical, a pixie or something like that. And it's just zipping all over the place. It's just a tiny little thing. And so your chase has these spurts of faster chasing after it, but it also slows down to catch its breath, and you're getting winded too. And that kind of brings things down. Sometimes you might want to get a little more sneaky about it instead of the headstrong, I'm just going to run after it no matter which direction it zips. I'm going to zag in that direction too. And the chase is what this song sounds like. I think it kind of works on both levels there. The very literal definition of chasing a sound, and just trying to find some pieces to a song to create a larger idea, but also this figurative idea of chasing sound, having a physical representation of sound to literally run after. And that's what I get out of it. And I think it kind of benefits it to be as chaotic and wild as it is. Again, like I said at the beginning, I have an artistic appreciation for this track. I think it's a wonderful idea, but it does, at the end of the day, sound like a bunch of ideas that they couldn't do anything with, and instead of just leaving on the cutting room floor, smashed them together and called it a song. And while there's really cool artistic meaning behind that, it's not something I really enjoyed listening to. One time, sure, the experimentation, the eclectic elements, all of the skill put on display. I'm glad I heard it once, but there just isn't anything here that makes me want to come back to it. It doesn't have that cohesion of musical storytelling outside of artistic theme that Yes can certainly lean into. And what draws me into other Yes tracks makes me want to come back to them. Let me hit some lyrics on this. There's only like 2 lyrical segments. I don't think this is going to be a very long lyrical analysis, but still, let's see what they're singing about in this one. Lyrically, this seems to expand upon the idea of a spiritual relationship with sound. Verse 1 says, faster moments spent spread tales of change within the sound, counting form through rhythmic electric freedom. Moves to counterbalance stars expound our conscience, all to know and see the look in your eyes. This idea of changing sound and counting form through electric freedom, I mean, it sounds like the creation of music. To understand that sound will always change, and our job as musicians is to wrangle that sound into something worth listening to, in a sense. sound is chaotic and we are creating form to that, which actually might describe the intro of the song rather well. I mentioned it was sort of like throwing a bunch of toys out of a toolbox to find the one you want, but I also mentioned that it coalesces this chaos into a form, into that guitar, bass, and drum, that unified idea there of taking all of these ideas and simplifying it down to just one. Like I said, I think that works well with trying to create form through electric freedom. Verse 2, not too sure about, kind of deviates a little from my from my initial read, but it says passing time will reach as nature relays to set the scene. New encounters spark a true fruition. Guiding lines, we touch them, our bodies balance out the waves as we accelerate our days to the look in your eyes. There is still an element here that I think works within the larger narrative of trying to seek out a sound, trying to capture that inspiration here. New encounters spark a true fruition of gaining something that you could build off of by going through new experiences. But the other three lines don't really touch on that too much, and I'm not too sure about that final idea. As we accelerate our days to the look in your eyes, this mimics the end of verse 1, all to know and see the look in your eyes. Almost as if they're making this music for somebody to see what their reaction is. Probably not mine, though. The bridge, final thing in here, says, from the moment I reached out to hold, I felt a sound, and what touched our souls slowly moves as touch rebounds. And to know that tempo will continue, lost in trance of dances as rhythm takes another turn, as is my only want. I only reach to look in your eyes. And again, here we're talking about sound and the manipulation of it and how it affects us. What originally was to see what the look in your eyes was as I created the sound, now it's to see what the look in your eyes is as it touches your soul, as the sound touches your soul. I still think a majority of the song is about the creation of music, what musicians do. And I think that falls in line with the idea of chasing sound, to mold it from something chaotic and free into something with form and structure. I think it's interesting then that this is probably one of the least structured songs I've heard from Yes. But still, the end result is a song taking noise and creating 9 minutes of music out of it, of infinite possibility into a single idea, and seeing that resonate with people enough over the years that even 50 years later, it still touched someone enough to send to me to see what my reaction is to this music. There is a little bit more vocal stuff here. Of course, at the end we have the cha-cha-cha, cha-cha. And for some reason, I heard cha-cha-cha chaser in the song when I was listening to it, which I thought would have made it would have made good sense. Because the song's called Sound Chaser, but they never have that. It's just cha-cha-cha, cha-cha. And so I'm kind of curious what the point of that is. I mean, it's kind of nice to have vocals as a rhythm. We hear vocals do melody, we hear vocals do harmony. Of course, vocal melodies have rhythmic components to them, and there's even been some really cool rhythmic-based melodies that we've heard in the past that I've commented on, but very rarely do we have a vocal idea that is just a rhythmic idea. And in fact, it sounds a lot like they're trying to vocally replace shakers of some sort. You just don't hear that too much in music, especially not modern music. I feel like a lot of vocals have definitely leaned towards lead instruments. So even if they're not singing words, they're still singing notes. Melody is important. Whether that's scatting in jazz or doing ad-libs in a pop song, it's still melody and harmony over rhythm. But here we just have a cha-cha-cha, very percussion style idea. I think that's pretty cool. Now, to wrap this up, there is an annotation here, and I don't know how accurate it is because they don't list their sources. But the idea I get from this is that it was kind of a chaotic environment to record this. It seems like the keyboard player, Amid Miraz, this was his tryout session for the band, and he was inquired to play a presentation to this melody, and after only 1 or 2 takes, they took that and put it into the song. He said that he was not too excited about the way that his synthesizer was mixed in most of the song, but that he enjoyed the highlight at the end of the song, as he felt the rest of his Moog playing was buried in the mix. Which I thought was interesting because I had the inverse feeling to that, where I felt like that last moment was too present in the mix and it should have been brought down a little bit. I think the synthesizer was mixed well throughout the rest of that. Who's this dude? I only have a last name. Oh, Steve Howe. He thought the track was an indescribable mix of Patrick's jazzy keyboards and my weird sort of flamenco electric guitar. However, he disdained Miraz's beginning choice of chords he played in his guitar solo. Oh, I was wrong. Miraz is the guitarist? And, okay, so he also plays the synthesizer then. At least that's how I'm reading this. But yeah, he had a disdain for Miraz's beginning choice of chords, causing Miraz to play in an unexpected way, which he opposed this idea with. And it just seems a bunch of people weren't too happy with the way everything was going together, and it, honestly, I think it works well, creating this chaotic mix of everything. Also, I'm pretty confident I mixed up some of those instruments, who plays what right there. So y'all are welcome to explain to me how I was wrong there. But I do think that the chaotic and I guess people not being too happy with the creation process here led to a song that artistically works well. It is a song about, I think, at the end of the day, kind of being unhappy with the way things are and wanting them to change. Wanting to create something to see what someone else's reaction is, because they're not happy with the way that they're feeling right now. They want to improve it possibly. So I'll play some music and see if that brings a little bit of light to your eye. And that's kind of how I read the lyrics. But all of this is just my interpretation of it. What do you think of this song? Do you have your own thoughts or opinions or perspective on it? Do you have your own take on what it's supposed to represent? Do you just want to tell me I'm wrong about some stuff and correct me on things? Put all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this one. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.